is. On an average day, in many of the schools, 40% of the teachers may not be there. Some of the schools, by the way, are single teacher schools, and you can see the impact of that. Where I say 40%, that's an average. That means many schools there's no one there. And one of the things that we found when we talked with the parents, especially parents of young girls, that their alleged hesitation about sending their kids to the school is worry when they are, they're in their work in the agricultural fields or elsewhere. What would happen if there's absolutely nobody there? So the whole issue becomes terribly important. And of course we had to engage, therefore, those institutions which we thought were not engaged sufficiently. And in this particular case, I'm talking about West Bengal, with only two areas we have looked at in India, West Bengal and to a much less extent, Jharkhand next door. But in West Bengal, the whole issue is very closely linked with the teachers' union's activity. So we challenged the teachers' union to come and join us in this. We had a joint meeting in July between the All Bengal Primary Teachers Association, which is the Communist Union, and Pratichi Trust, about teacher accountability. And now actually next week I'm going to Calcutta, which is, they didn't want a joint meeting this time. It's a meeting of the union on this issue, where I happen to be the principal speaker, but not as the chair of the Pratichi Trust, but just as a human being. So I'm hoping that the unions could be mobilized to do something about it. After all, it's their responsibility, because if you see what has happened, in fact, I don't know how many people recognize, true, not just in West Bengal, across the country, with few exceptions like Kerala, to some extent Tamil Nadu, that you would find that the inspectorate system has simply gone. The inspectors are actually basically scared of teachers and teachers' union. So you don't get any kind of reporting from that. That's the way the British Empire, the small number of schools they had, that used to be run on the inspectorate system. The other is that the unions would not typically discuss or raise their voice about absenteeism and so on, because it was taken to be their role is to look after the interests of the teachers. But I think the whole issue was whether in a country that we are trying to build, which is the democratic India, which is also prosperous in economic terms, whether we don't need a completely different way of seeing what our respective responsibilities are, namely how the union could be more mobilized into looking after what could be seen as the interest of the local community, as well as the interest of the nation at large. So this is still going in very early stages. We are hoping that we will get something done on that. I think what was we were very lucky that the initiative that we managed to take ended up being, in this case, quite fruitful. It also had the effect. I mean, it's always a collaborative gesture. We rely, and I've always throughout from my earliest student days, I've tended to rely on newspapers. When I got the Nobel, when I was lucky enough to get the Nobel, the Statesman, which used to be a great paper I shouldn't say that, it is a great paper, I guess, but it was at that time almost uniquely the great paper in Calcutta. The Statesman published a whole lot of papers that I wrote 40 years ago, and people told me, how boring can you get? You're still saying the same things as you were saying then. And I said, well, the problems remain exactly the same. Not enough primary schools are not properly run. The healthcare systems don't work, and so on. There have been expansion, of course, but really the problem still remains very similar. But what we found is that the media is very collaborative. If you place to them a problem which they may not themselves articulate, but if you place them the problem, they will pursue that. Many years ago, I arranged a conference in Helsinki when I was running the research program on this side, on the poverty side of the new institute called WIDER of the United Nations. In one of the conferences, we have one of the editors, namely N. Ram of Hindu, coming, and he did a paper which we did publish later, as to why the Indian journalist has to be more enterprising in not looking at such obvious things, which I've already talked about, namely famine and famine prevention, but continuing standard undernourishment, continuing backwardness of women's opportunities and so forth, to be more imaginative. And that's certainly, and Ram is right, that is certainly one problem. But the other problem is, in fact, drawing that if you draw the attention to the papers, and the paper's willing to carry it, then you need actually some activist, some initiative to make sure that even if the media is not being sufficiently active, that their willingness to carry things can be used to place this problem in perspective. As you can see that in this, we are concerned really of sharing information, to know how dreadful some things are, and I always have tended to take the view that identifying a problem is half the way to solving it, and a lot of the problem is informational. Similarly, when the question of organization like school absenteeism comes, I remember I see Ramadurai has reappeared after having gone off to Chennai, and we had a very nice conversation some years ago, actually, he may not remember it, about how some of the modern IT technology could be used to monitor the issue of presence and reporting and making things run more smoothly. I think there are all kinds of imaginative ways in which the IT can take on sectors which it has not really gone into very much. It's a very new sector. I'm always thrilled by what it has already done, but that does not stop me from pointing out what additionally they can still do. And I would like to emphasize that the neglect of basic education, neglect of basic health care, neglect of water, on which already Saurabh spoke, and other things, have both an informational dimension and an organizational dimension, in each of which the IT sector with imagination can really play a very major role.